And then ferritin is usually released as a result of blunt force trauma. And the crucifixion would qualify on both counts.
Right.
So even the latest blood chemistry supports this being the image of a man who is severely traumatized. In fact, one of the latest news articles that came out this past week was that some more advanced blood chemistry on some of the blood particles shows the evidence of creatine and ferritin. And creatine is a substance that is the result of extreme stress. And then ferritin is usually released as a result of blunt force trauma. And the crucifixion would qualify on both counts. So even the latest blood chemistry supports this being the image of a man who is severely traumatized.
And what role do faith and scientific inquiry play in your personal journey with the Shroud? How do you balance these two aspects in your work and presentations?
Well, I was a believer in Jesus before I ever knew about the Shroud.
Yeah.
And so for me, I never needed the Shroud for my faith. Still don't. It's however, my approach to it is that I've always thought that the Shroud was meant for somebody, and it was and would be a wonderful apologetic tool, if you will, to that speaks to the historical fact of Jesus. It's not some myth, not a legend, not a fairy tale, and that he lived, he died according to just exactly as the scriptures say. You have a man here who received all the same exact wounds of crucifixion as recorded in all four Gospels. So in other words, if you were to say this, well, how do you know it's Jesus? There's thousands of people who are crucified. How do you know it's him? Well, the way you do answer that question is what's called forensic analysis. So if we do a forensic analysis of the man, almost like an autopsy, okay? First of all, you see there's a whole pattern of bloodstains all around the head from about 30 puncture wounds from an apparent crown of thorns. And we know that the scripture talks about Jesus receiving a crown of thorns. And not only did he receive a crown of thorns, but they took sticks and beat those thorns into his head, driving them deep into his skull. So, not everyone received the crown of thorns as a routine of crucifixion. It was a singular mockery for the man who claimed to be king of the Jews. And then you have a massive amount of scourging or whipping all over the body. Now, why was Jesus scourged so badly? Because Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, didn't think Jesus was guilty of a crime worthy of capital punishment. He didn't want to kill him. And the first thing he did, he sent him to King Herod. Herod sent him back. Then he tried to trade Barabbas, and that didn't work. And so finally he has him scourged to within an inch of his life, thinking that when this bloodied hulk of a man came walking back into the courtyard, they'd say, well, okay, that's enough. You don't have to kill him. But that's not what happened, is it? In spite of being brutally scourged, they still wanted him dead. And so, and then, Jesus gives up his spirit at 3 p.m. The soldiers, the Romans, come back by around 4 p.m. And because the Jewish high priest didn't want any bodies left on the crosses, because the very next day was Passover, the high Sabbath. And so what did they do? They shattered the legs, or they broke the bones of both of the thieves on either side of Jesus. Now, why would they break their legs? Because it would speed the process of asphyxia, the inability to breathe. and because you can't stand on broken legs, and so they would. But what does the scripture say? When they came to Jesus, they noticed he was already dead. Therefore, they did not break his legs. But what did they do? Before they could take him down from the cross and release him over to Joseph of Arimathea, remember, he's the one that purchased the linen shroud that Jesus was wrapped in. He's the same man that owned the tomb in which Jesus would be placed in. Okay, so before they could release Jesus to Joseph, they had to make sure he was dead. So they stabbed him in the side with a spear, and out flowed blood and water, probably blood and blood serum, the separation of blood and blood serum, which, because he was probably hanging up there on the cross, dead for 30 minutes to an hour. And then there would have been a collection of blood in his chest cavity, the heart no longer beating, the blood no longer circulating. There'd be a separation of the blood and blood serum. In comes the spear, out flows blood and serum, which looked like blood and water to John. And it's as he records in his gospel. And so everything correlates with the very precise set of wounds that is recorded in the gospel, and right down to this too. So Joseph of Arimathea, the shroud is a very expensive fabric. It's made of a fairly complex 3-to-1 herringbone pattern weave. It's doable in first century using first century loom technology, but it's expensive, and so therefore rare. Now, what does the scripture say? Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man, purchased a fine linen cloth. So everything about the shroud itself would indicate that this is one of the most expensive fabrics you could buy at the time, simply because of the way that it was woven. And so now here you have a man who's clearly died a criminal's death. He's crucified. You crucify criminals, that's all. And so he died a criminal's death, and yet he's wrapped in a rich man's shroud and placed in a rich man's tomb. That is a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Isaiah 53:9 says, it's talking about this future Messiah. He says he will make his grave with the wicked and the rich in his death. And it's exactly what happened. And it's exactly what we see with the shroud.
The shroud is often described as both a religious icon and a scientific mystery. How do you see these two perspectives converging or conflicting in the ongoing study of the shroud?
I think it's just a matter of perspective. It can easily be both. It is an object of veneration. It's been called a symbol of Christ's suffering, worthy of veneration. The Catholic Church has not made any official statement over the shroud's authenticity, but they have obviously encouraged veneration of it because it represents, everything that happened to Jesus, and it's so that's fine for the church to take kind of a middle path on that, because after all, as I said before, we don't have the DNA of Jesus to match it up with something we might extract from the shroud. So you can never prove it with scientific certainty that this is in fact the burial shroud of Jesus, but we can prove what it's not, and it's not the work of an artist. And so therefore you can decide what it is for yourself. And it's, we're not going to do that for you. You can decide. You can look at the evidence, and it's plain as day, published in 24 peer-reviewed journal articles and more now, and you can decide what it means for you. And it's and I think that's how you approach it. It can be an object of scientific analysis if you're kind of an analytical type, or it can be an object of of veneration and devotion. It can be both.
So mga ka-faith, a quick promotion lang ng bagong libro ni Brother Bo Sanchez. Multiple Income Streams, How I Created 7 Money Machine, and How You Can Too by Brother Bo Sanchez. At kung di nyo po kilala si Brother Bo Sanchez, sino bang hindi nakakilala sa kanya na isang sikat na Catholic preacher, influencer at motivational speaker, at kilala rin si Brother Bo Sanchez na isang magaling na financial teacher, kaya sinulat niya itong multiple income streams. Good news mga faith na itong librong ito ni Brother Bo Sanchez ay libre lang po ito. This is for free, pinamimigay niya to ng libre sa mga interested po na magkaroon ng libreng copy ng librong ito ni Brother Bo Sanchez. Alam nyo, nung binabasa ko to, ang dami ko natutunan dito ng mga teachings ni Brother Bo. Siya yung naging way at naging dahilan para magawa kong full-time itong ginagawa ko bilang isang online content creator. Dahil doon nakapag-build ako ng 4 na sources of income, kaya ako nagagawa itong ginagawa ko ngayon. At yung mga teachings na yun ay nandito sa libreng libro na to ni Brother Bo Sanchez. Para magkaroon kayo ng libreng copy na to, ilalagay ko yung link sa taas or sa baba ng video na to. Kailangan nyo lang ay sagutin yung shipping fee. Pwedeng through credit card or kung GCash kayo magbabayad, piliin nyo lang yung DragonPay, makikita nyo option dyan. Thank you and God bless.